Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining today. We're going to give everybody about 15 to 20 seconds to head from our waiting room to the main webinar. While we do so, I am just going to run a quick poll. If you want to go ahead and answer that, we just kind of want to get an understanding of where everyone is coming from today and what usage level you're at with Smartsheet. Okay, excellent. It looks like we have a good number of people in already, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And we will just wait for others to kind of enter. One thing I do want to call out, we are recording today. So if you have to hop off early or maybe you have team members who can't join us, we are going to make that recording available to the public in a few days following the event. So thank you all of those who could join. Okay. So if we want to get started, Chris, if you want to go to the next slide. So again, thank you everyone for joining today. I'm excited to have you all here for this manufacturing focused user group. My name is Kelsey Hayden and I'm a product marketing manager here at Smartsheet, and I'll be the host for today's event. And with me, we actually have the Optimum team, who is a platinum partner of Smartsheet, and they're going to be walking us through some various use cases and solutions that they've actually helped Smartsheet users like yourselves stand up. And among them are Chris Mondo and Eddie Nostrand, and they're going to be walking us through some of those examples today and actually giving us some demos. So I'm really excited for them to showcase what they've been able to accomplish with the platform and build for some of our customers. Chris, if you want to go to the next slide. One thing I do want to remind everyone of, you are muted in the webinar, but we do have the chat icon at the bottom and also the Q&A option available. So if you have questions throughout the presentation as Chris is walking through those demos or some of those use cases, you can feel free to type in any questions in either of those spots. We do have a number of team members here from Smartsheet and also Optimum helping to answer some of those questions. So feel free to pop them in there. We will get to them live during some of the demos, but then we also do have time allotted at the end to go through some of those questions that are coming in. So definitely don't be shy, and any questions you have, please enter them there. Next slide. Okay. And just to quickly go through the agenda today, like I mentioned, we do have our platinum partner Optimum here with us, which we're super excited about. They will be giving us an overview of their business and how they help Smartsheet users. And from there, they do have some demos prepared for product management, inventory management, facilities management, and also safety and compliance. So Chris is going to be walking through those 4 use cases and showcasing some of the work that they've done and built in the Smartsheet platform. After that, we do have time, like I said, allotted for Q&A. And then following that, we'll just do a quick overview of some of the different Smartsheet programs and resources that are available to you all here on the call today. All right, next slide. And with that, Chris, I'd like to hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking a slot of time out of your busy day today. I appreciate the opportunity to showcase and share and hopefully collaborate in the future. So a little bit about Optimum. So we are a consulting company, and specifically within the Smartsheet environment, as well as within Microsoft. We're both gold partners in Microsoft and platinum in Smartsheet. So we do a lot of development between those 2 platforms, not only in the IT space, but as well as marketing, legal, manufacturing, and healthcare kind of categories. So some of the things in Smartsheet that we really specialize and focus on is the customization of the templates, both of the sheets, reports, and dashboards, to roll up inside of a comprehensive suite of tools for your organizations and applications throughout the business. We're also very proficient in a lot of the premium apps that can really help expand the core use case of Smartsheet with the other services and tie into third-party applications or any of your other ERP systems. Right, and a little bit about myself. So Chris Mondo, I've been working with Optimum just for a little bit now, but I've been working inside the Smartsheet environment for over 10 years. and across other multiple business areas, especially in the construction and manufacturing space, as well as within IT systems, focus a lot on digital transformation and taking projects or items that are in pen and paper or verbal format and putting them inside of a database-like structure to really maximize that collection of information for your business needs. So this one, we're really going to dive straight into the demo and the showcase. This is to show you guys some of the applications. So one of the hot spots, especially in manufacturing, is making sure that you're managing the materials you have for production. So some of the things that we see as pain points is knowing when to get material reordered so you can continue production. And beyond that as well as tracking, if your inventory is accurate, because without that system, you're going to lose out on those objects. So you can't produce. That's going to cause a bottleneck within your pipeline, and that's going to delay out to the customers. So showing places where we can help impact that. And also focusing on a mobile-friendly workspace. We understand that not everyone is a super user. They may not like Excel. So we want to give them a tool inside of a working environment, whether in the warehouse or the shop floor, so they can easily view that information and update it on the fly. And then for some of the larger integrations or developments, we want to kind of touch base on sheet designs or layouts that might integrate with existing services. So if you're using Oracle or SAP or Microsoft Dynamics for your big backends or financial services, some of the points that we can do to tie into those systems. So you're not recreating an entire solution, you're really building tools to enhance what's already out there. So before we step into the sheet, I've just got a couple little pictures up on screen, and this is just a basic inventory sheet that can expand and grow with your needs. And then we've got a mobile view inside of it. So without further ado, we will dive on in. So within this sheet, this is a basic inventory log, and we'll kind of go through some of the columns and some of the formattings that we have in here. So we have a status column, we've got QR code images, descriptions of some of these assets inside. And this may be one of your standard inventory objects. So really we're showing you the products. The team members will also be able to see where those objects are located at. You can see an available quantity, in stock, expected, which would be items that you've got coming in from orders. If it's been picked, it's going to be a committed point and then reorder points. So those will be your thresholds. So this is a relatively flat table, but within this design of a sheet, what we can do is we can maximize the record limits of the sheet and continue to add more products and services as your businesses are growing and be able to track that full segment of inventory. So you can implement this with a lightweight approach. You don't have to have as many of these attributes inside of here. It could just be as simple as I need a product, I need to know how many I have on hand. One of the values inside of a sheet with this style is your users will be able to, whether they're in the shop, office, or field, you could even share this to customers outside of your organization where they can view an inventory on hand if they want to prep for an estimation or project in your pipeline. So a lot of these things in this sheet specifically are going to be automated. So our status balls or our Harvey colored balls are going to be based on the available quantity that's inside of your warehouse versus the items that are in order. So we can set up rules in here that are going to showcase if we are low stock, we can highlight it yellow to give your users a visual cue of what might be remaining. And if it's an out of stock item, we'll update this down to a negative quantity, highlight in red to really show you what's going on. Now, in your inventories, you can have a very large database or library of content. So we'd want to give you guys some ways to quickly filter these assets. So we can leverage filters inside of Smartsheet to show you all of your low stock items or all the ones that are out of stock that you can use to reorder these points. If you would like, you can definitely export the sheet and send it to a vendor. Conversely, you could collaborate with a vendor who's one of these resellers and you can share them to their sheets. Or what we can do is we can create workflow automations inside of these templates. So this is just the base one. whenever a inventory quantity dips below our expected threshold, we can send it out to a specific user to say, hey, this asset is low, please reorder. And that can be done internal to your team. So it can go to your procurement team, where it will give them the item SKU, the last vendor that was contacted, and then they can just put in the reader point right there. So it's a self-sustaining system. So you won't have to come in, look at the sheet, what's low. We can set up that automated alert to go directly to the source. So it's self-sufficient. So with that, it's a bit more of a real-time approach to inventory to help free up and get you guys those assets or those inventory items as soon as they're low, and try to get those before they go out of stock. So we're going to mention one point. There's a great question that just popped up about hundreds of thousands of unique parts to maintain, especially for those finite SKUs. So within Smartsheet, you can have several sheets that break out by categories. So you could have an inventory for maybe it's clips or fasteners, and then you could create another sheet for other consumable items such as adhesives or glues. And these sheets can be aggregated into reports. So we know there's some technical limits of how many rows could be displayed, but there's a good way to take those from Smartsheet and combine them together into a full segment. There's also additional services such as data tables, which can expand the limits and the storage of what's inside of a sheet, so you can have a higher volume of those inventory items. And that's kind of up here on one of these pages here as a connected. So if I wanted to save the sheet as a data table and expand my range, I can save this as a table, name this a new master SKU base if I'd like. And then I can work and import my data or set up a sync inside of my system. So if you wanted to update your inventory from this, what you can do is you can export or cut up a live connection to your MRP or your ERP systems, where it can bulk export data, import it into Smartsheet, and all of that's going to be automated. So your users won't have to go through a process. It'll be self-sustaining. And that can help take information from Smartsheet, where maybe your shop users or your floor users are updating the quantities as they're picking items or relocating them inside of the sheet. And that will update your auxiliary systems from there.
And Chris, kind of on that automation piece, I know John had asked if you could talk a little bit about how you are automating the inputs into the sheet. Could you just explain that a little bit?
Sure. So in this sheet specifically, this is a manual plug, but you can definitely input data via, there's a couple of additional apps, and that can be done with Data Shuttle. And what that does is you can upload an attachment straight to the sheet, and it will recognize that file. Say you're adding in 5,000 new products. You can take the same columns, you can map those to say, this is my SKU, this is my item. You may not know exactly where you're storing it yet, so you can take a partial batch of information, provide that with a CSV file, and then with the Data Shuttle application, that will automatically add it to your base. That's one of the native kind of connections and showcases for Smartsheet. But because Smartsheet also has a custom API, if you've got an external tracking system that you're using, like Sage or Oracle, that your bread and butter is really in for like procurement purchases, we can extract that data automatically by connecting Smartsheet to any of those systems. So there's a wealth of ways to interact with that information and sync it across.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. I know there's a few questions coming in about how you're like importing the data in. And one thing I do want to mention is tools like Data Shuttle or any of our connectors. We have one for Jira and Salesforce. Those are additional products that you can add to core Smartsheet. But to Chris's point, we do have an open API as well. So if you don't have access to those tools, the API is an option if you have maybe a resource internally who can help with that.
And I always threw this on the demos because it's always a wonderful talking point, is QR codes. So it's not just QR codes, you can use barcodes. And what this does in an application, this is really great for your mobile users. In the Smartsheet mobile app, if you have a QR code on an asset, or maybe it's a location on your shelving unit, you can scan that QR code in the Smartsheet application. It can bring you straight to it to update. So in an example with this caller, if I'm a warehouse worker and I need to update my inventory, I'm doing one of my periodic audits, I can go out on the floor, scan that QR code on the mobile app, and it will bring me straight to that row to update the on-hand quantity accounts. Now, the generation of the QR codes, that's not something that's native to Smartsheet, but with an API application, we can read the information from the rows and embed that in there to help generate that. A sheet like this, you can also create your labels. So if you're, putting it as a finished product or as part of a stock material or make to order item, you would be able to generate that document and then list that out from there. Right. And on that part of the automations, at least for the inventory audits, sometimes it's difficult for users to go through and say, hey, I want to make sure that these items are updated. Because Smartsheet has a full revision and version history, everything inside of the sheet is tracked. So if a user edits a cell or moves it, updates the status, deletes it, that information will always be available. So if you need to recover information in the instance that it had been removed or modified, you can view the activity logs of these sheets and then get that information to restore. So in this case, there was a large bulk change. I can download that and kind of view that for an audit trail and open back up. You also have the ability to restrict who can access or edit these sheets as well. So if you've got users that should just only be consuming the information on the sheet and just view it, you can share it to them with viewer permissions. There's a new permission that's come out from Smartsheet called the commenter, which I think is a really big win. And that allows them to not only view information on the sheet, but to also make notes on side of these SKUs. So for example, if you've got a third-party auditor coming through, or maybe a project manager wants to see what's on stock they could ship out to a job site, or for a hot production order, they could come in and put just a request to say, I need 7 items here, post that. And then the teams that's managing the inventory sheet can be alerted both in their email and on the mobile app real time, and they can collaborate real time to get more clarification of this information, such as, how might you need these guys bundled up or wrapped out. And expanding on the auditing purpose and the function. So looping back, if we had a shop floor staff that's saying, I need to go through and be able to find the list of items that have been touched. Maybe I'm trying to figure out the velocity of my inventory. I might have to refresh that. We can track kind of the activity of the sheet by the last date modified and build a report to say, this is going to be our periodic audit for this date and month. We need to go through these 6 items. And that's going to be based on the real-time consumption of the information inside of your sheet here. So again, a shop worker could go through, they could build a filtered list, or you could provide them with a filtered list of content to say, items that may not have been updated in the past 90 days, let's go through and make sure that those objects have the accurate in-stock quantities inside of the tool set. Track and order history, quick is being used. So this sheet doesn't have a lot of historic data on it for the demo, but there's a great tool inside of Smartsheet now called Work Insights. And this is really good for timeline information. So my information is going to be a little limited within this pitch, but if you want to see how much these objects are flying off the shelf to analyze, to either increase or decrease your reorder point or add in additional roles, you can expand the Work Insights tabs and see how your products are flowing over by the status and kind of do in-sheet analysis of these. So you can see, what's the status of them by if it's in quantity, out of quantity, reserved, how it's flowing over time, et cetera. So this is something that's being developed more and more from Smartsheet, but plays particularly well with historic data to do kind of a mini analysis without having to, export it offline or tie in. Of course, all that historic data of cells changing is available via the API. So if you really want to drill down, maybe connect it to a Power BI dashboard, you'll be able to plug into those extra services and get all the information. And that information is basically all the stuff that's tracked inside of the activity log.
I can also put in our help article for the Work Insights tool that Chris just showed. That's super useful. I know I use it all the time. So if you want more information, that is something that many of you can utilize today. One quick note too, I know there's a lot of questions coming in about that connections tab that Chris had clicked on, showcasing data table. many of you probably don't have access to this today. It is something we're still rolling out, and you may not have it included with your current plan. So if you have questions, we'll run a poll later. So if you want follow-up, we can do that to provide you with more information about it.
So I'm going to back out a page. So that's just focusing on the data sheet, basically. So the inventory sheet is what is really capturing the user's interaction, what's on hand, et cetera. So that inside of that inventory sheet, you'll be able to see that information and visualize it in Smartsheet. So again, bread and butter system. If you need to consume that, it's available on web and mobile. And that's pretty much the wrap up for inventory. Do want to make sure we're still going good. So if there's no major questions, we'll plug into our next topic.
Just one question that had come in from Michael, and this could probably relate to this use case and the others you're going to show, but how have you found adoption to be with maybe customers that you've helped to set this up for? Have they shared those insights? Is it pretty easy to use and maintain?
Yeah, I would say there's kind of three major categories, and that's kind of the value with Smartsheet is it can grow with your needs. So you can start with a very basic inventory sheet, kind of what I alluded to earlier, is just an item and an on-hand quantity. And so as you're growing with the needs of the business and the complexities, you may not need to know where these are objects or like, you can really start up a service. So a lot of times with inventory, it's easier to start with a simplified version first and then grow and expand as that needs. So we've done implementations where it's just been absolutely bare bones because the users don't know what they have on hand. We're allowing them to start to use Smartsheet to create a basic sheet, and then it will grow organically within their application with the team. And there's certainly limitations where we've worked with clients where they have a large ERP already implemented and we need to mock those sheets. A lot of the times a build of that is we'll just take an export of their inventory data and then we can actually create a template straight from Smartsheet. And you can do that just by, we'll do a quick deviation. So if I wanted to make a new sheet, I can just right click and import from Excel. And so if you already have a spreadsheet or an inventory, maybe you're tracking inventory in an Excel spreadsheet, you can just directly import that and it'll create the sheet for you with all the column names. It has a way to kind of smart structure those items based on dates or drop-down lists with the content in. And then after you import it, you can go through and you can modify these fields. So inside my aisle, row, and bin, I've got these as drop-down options. And so you can modify these within your needs, but that helps you get restricted data to help your reporting and keep information consistently flowing. All right. If there's no other questions as far as adoption on that goes, there'll be kind of a general trend for the rest of the slides is usually we see a crawl, walk, run with clients is a really good way to go. And that's that engages the higher adoption because you start with something simple and then you can expand on it as it evolves over time. Smartsheet will help you scale into that. So a lot of the designs that we do will be with that in mind, or we'll do iterative buildings with clients. So, we'll show them a product and we can build it real time with them so they can understand how that gets developed. And that's the power of Smartsheet, is that's able to very easily start up and then kind of move from there.
Chris, if I could add a little bit just to that point. So I'm Angela Cisneros. I'm the delivery manager here on our Smartsheet side for Optimum. And for us, a big thing in getting teams on board and adopting effectively, it's really all around how you roll it out. So rolling out something that is a solid solution and meets the needs of the team is really important. So it sort of starts at the beginning of our process where for us, we go through sort of a deep dig into how you guys are working and make sure that Smartsheet, the functionality that we're building, will meet those needs. And that's really big in getting the team adopted. And then once we go into actually rolling it out, making sure that it's a fully built out system, that's huge in terms of getting people like bought into using Smartsheet for any use case that we've seen. Typically, as long as the solution will meet the needs in a way that's easy for people to get to, and they can navigate the solution pretty just effectively. I think that makes a big difference when it comes to adoption. So just a little plug there. The more work you do up front, the better the adoption will be in the end. That's it. Go ahead, Chris.
Real quick, Chris and Angela, that was a great point. Thank you for jumping in. I know a question just came in. What is the highest level of inventory volume management you have seen being used through Smartsheet? Not sure if you can answer that.
Yeah, so knowing there are some limitations with the sheets as far as the total row counts, that's usually where we will split it, measure by category. But we've seen things where it's been upwards of 100,000 SKUs that are uniquely tracked. So it really depends on how you want to store that information, but overall they'll follow the same kind of sheet structure to expand. So high volume of SKUs. Once you kind of define how that goes, it can really expand up from there. And that could be something that you might make copies of this sheet to kind of extend that further, or look at other services that can help automate that copy process. Like Control Center can help you say, we're to spin up a new product catalog per se, and that will create everything kind of as a batch for you from there. So it can definitely scale up pretty high as far as the full counts. Again, I think with our realms, we've done in the hundreds of thousands of information, and there's several of hundreds of users that might need to be engaged in that sheet as well. And the nice thing is it's not necessarily just at one location. Individuals can be collaborating across multiple warehouses. So you could have an inventory sheet that's for the company, and you could have warehouses, all around the states or, across seas and internationally, and people would be collaborating inside that same sheet. So now you're not having disparate systems or someone saying, hey, can you come in and update my Excel file, pass it via email, update it back. It's all done in the same spot. All right. We'll do this last question, and we'll switch over to the, I think the production planning and facilities management portion. So inventory sheet for retail. I think it really depends on the level of complexities of the builds. So this example is more for kind of a one-off inventory, but if you're looking to combine pieces for like a larger assembly or to combine them into a bill of materials for a specific build, that can be done inside Smartsheet. So there are elements where you might have a work order that combines multiple line items inside of that to build, and that would be use cases within probably a couple of sheets. So a one line item sheet, and then maybe one that's a conglomeration of those orders. There is a way inside Smartsheet to either do a hierarchical function where you can say one row is a hierarchy, and we'll try to do this a little bit live. So if we just put on kind of a mask, this could be our batch order up here. And if I expand and collapse this, they could say these 3 items are belonging to that specific order and develop from there. Or you can use the new grouped reporting functions on reports to group in specific orders within that SKU. So, all right. So we'll pass on from inventory, and if we have any time at the end, we can certainly explore some of those other guys from there. Right. Next up is facilities management. So a lot of the times while you're producing something, the worst thing that can happen is if maybe it's your main assembly line or a welder, or maybe it's a metal worker that goes down, and that's one of the critical components within your department. You can build a variety of facility management tools inside Smartsheet, some varying from low complexity all the way up to a higher complexity. Some of the trends that we usually see and have built out are a scheduled maintenance program where you may have an asset that has to be updated every 30 days. Maybe you want to use a utilization-based maintenance, which is a more popular way of doing it, to say, based on the number of inspections we have or runtime for those assets that are running, that then triggers the alert. And that can lower your costs or expenses of the maintenance, as opposed to sending out techs every week to do service that may not be needed. It's only going to be done when that machine's operable. So those are some ones you can make. Of course, collecting information really feeds that power, that machine, to analyze what's going on in your warehouse or in your facility. So being able to provide a quick form for your end users or your operators who are working on that equipment gets you that information. So a lot of the times when we do builds, we try to focus on the end users who are giving us that information. plug in. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a human end user. If you're using a remote kind of monitoring service or tool, if it's temperature or vibration, we can take that data from those auxiliary devices and sync them into Smartsheet to roll up, or integrate those more with even deeper analytic services like Tableau or Power BI for those. So again, in here, just a quick little showcase. We've got a facility dashboard, which gives you kind of an overall item. And then we've got a mobile kind of view for a web form. So part of the routines, if you're running up your shop for the day, you may require all your operators before turning on the asset or the tool that they're working with, goes through just a daily inspection. And you can build that list to be as comprehensive as you'd like, or you can build it simple just to say, is it safe? Is it running? The degree of complexity really can vary within your builds, and that's just going to provide you with a different subset of data. So in this one, we're going to step into the dashboard. And this would be something that maybe a facility manager or production manager might have pulled up at the beginning of his day. So from here, we've just got a quick link to an inspection form. So maybe one of his foremen on the floor is coming up, hey, one of these equipment's down. They can type in the ID. If you have a barcode on the ID, you can scan that and it would enter in. You can update the status of that asset. You can type in notes. There's a really nice feature on the mobile app that there's a text to speech. So a lot of times you get really bad notes because people have a hard time typing. I am definitely guilty of that. So when I'm trying to do a large report that's more detailed, I might be looking at the machinery and talking into the mobile app, and it will be translating that word into text. You can type the inspection date, select from a list of technicians, and then what's really valuable is being able to take a picture of the issue. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. When you're out inspecting that machining equipment, you can take several pictures. You can mark up those photos. You can even take videos of what you're experiencing within those inspection reports. And that just provides additional information for maybe your repair or maintenance staff to follow up on these tasks. So again, we're thinking high level of this, just at a glance. Pie charts or bubble charts pie charts or donut charts are a really great way to get that snapshot information. An ID being, if you're walking by the dashboard and you see something that's really red, something's wrong, you want to go through that. So we try to think of those kind of constraints when building these tools to get you fast and effective information without going in too detailed, and give you maybe a drill down approach further. So in this case, we're just kind of summarizing the total items of our tools. So very similar to a stack light in your facility, we've got these things where if it's green, it's operational. Blue, maybe the worker needs additional materials or consumables to continue building. Warning might be a sensor state on one of your assets, and failure could be a failed state, whether it's reported by a human or a sensor reports it as failed. There's additional information. So if you're tracking in items such as the value or the service costs of these repairs, that can roll up so you can see your operational expenses for these assets. And then we've just got some navigational items to go to maybe specific things. I want to see my full list of tools and equipment in the shop, look at all the inspections, service entries, and then I can see these recorded over time. So something that's really good if you're trying to do one of those daily reports on all of your inspections, you would expect to see your inspections at a straight line. And you may see a correlation that if someone missed an inspection, that there's going to be an appropriate service entry at that same point. And then we've just got a quick summary of the assets in here. So we can see, belt sanders, this could be any one of your welding machines, or maybe it's conveyor system, when it was last service, a next scheduled service. So if it's past due on a service, this could give you a proactive item to either go in and call your maintenance guy or mechanic, go through and follow up, or similar to the inventory sheet, we can set an automated alert to say 30 days before the next service, as part of that proactive maintenance or with preventive maintenance, send them an alert to say this object or this asset needs to make sure that there's updates maintained. The user can go in and service that item. So we're going to go into the asset log, and we're kind of putting on the mindset of a mechanic per se. So if I get a notification that my equipment is down and my iron worker, one of the things in Smartsheet you can do is not only see the pictures of the issues, but also you can upload maybe the operations manuals or the service manuals for those. So now your mechanics aren't having to bounce back and forth between vendor sites. they can come to a central hub of information, and they can leave their notes either as row-based conversations. They can be communicating with the vendors. You can look at those file attachments. This could be, again, the manufacturer for sure, the link to the vendor for any support or auxiliary tool sets. You can list your operators who may be certified to work on that equipment. And that can help as far as a safety of reporting thing, as we'll see in a further item. You can see its purchase date, purchase price if you store those, and that can help you track the value over time, or maybe come up to say, we should retire this asset and bring on a new one with some additional finance services. So some of these other columns in here, these are using cross-sheet references. So items like an index match or collect functions, and these are relating back to an inspection report. So every time we complete an inspection, we're recycling that information effectively back to the central hub of data from there. So that's things we'll be able to see all the part costs that are associated with that, are the labors. Again, last time it was service to schedule new services and that. And then using a similar form or function, we've built workflow automations to say, when this service is due soon, we'll send out the facilities manager or the operators, hey, this is time that you need to go through and update this service. So that is the assets. I'm actually going to go into the inspections. And this one is, it can be entered into a web form. So if you've got workstations on your actual plant floor, you can have these kind of saved or bookmarked or deployed out. So every day when your techs are doing it, they can go through, log in, record the asset, update these notes, provide pictures or files, and that just automatically goes back to the log. If you have mobile devices such as iPhones, iPads, or tablets, the same function can be opened up on those devices. So you're really empowering users to give you your information without having to get an overwhelming amount of information just to kind of get these things started. So it's a great way to start collecting data and use it further from there. So I'm going to go back into the sheet. And then again, just an example. So if I was looking at my bandsaw, say it got down, one of my techs reported that the blade got stuck. So I can view the issue, probably need a new blade, maybe a new drive will have to be ordered, an update. I can record all the conversation attachments with this. I can assign a technician. So when a new request comes in, I can set up a workflow as a facility manager to say, hey, this bandsaw had failed the inspection. What would you like it to do? And I can see the notes, right? The blade got stuck. The inspection happened a couple months back. I want to assign a tech. Maybe I know Angela's out sick. I can go down the list and then I can assign maybe myself to work on that work item. I can view any kind of attachments, update notes, and then submit an update. So some of the values with an update request is it allows you to update information kind of on the fly, and you don't necessarily have to be inside of the sheet to do that. So you may have seen that this cell updated in blue. I could be out on a job site or maybe attending a trade show. And if a new item comes in, I can update it from my phone, my email, and that'll update information real time back inside of the sheet. So the idea with this is, again, we're trying to limit the amount of maintenance work that users have to do and try to build a system that's really self-sufficient and kind of feed off of itself.
And Chris, real quick, a question had come in from Elizabeth. And they had asked, any general advice for using something at this level when we are moderately skilled in Smartsheet? And the example they provided is when they're using maybe like a template, I'm guessing that they've downloaded from the Solution Center with multiple sheet references, their users tend to maybe delete some of the references or they're disappearing and they have to start over again and add them. When you're maybe building out solutions like this for Smartsheet users, what are some things that you might put in place or things that you might advise so that you can, I guess, prevent those errors in the future?
Yeah, so some things that we really like using, and probably I would say my personal favorite formula that I really recommend everyone really uses is the column-based formula. That's probably the #1 tool that I recommend for all builds. And what that does is, previous generations of Smartsheet, it was just a standalone formula. And if you deleted that row, that formula wouldn't carry through. So if you implement a column-based formula, it will always stay locked. And the only time someone can modify that is if they're an admin of that sheet to update those. So it's a really great way to make sure that the sheet is working effectively. And if you're using cross-sheet formula references like I'm using in this, it keeps it stable. There are some additional security things you can do, such as locking the columns or locking the rows to preventing users. And again, with those newer permission sets like the commenters, you can kind of help update those users with that information. Excuse me, there is an additional or a new application called Work Apps. And what that does is it really helps enhance the security or permissions inside of the tool sets that you build. So if I had, an inventory sheet and maybe I was tracking in costs and my floor staff didn't need to see that, you can give them a subset of information, kind of like the way reports work. But in a reports world, they also have to have access to the underlying sheet. Work apps or dynamic views eliminate that need. They can just be shared straight to that application. And that's, instead of 10 columns of information they're displayed, it's only 4 or 5 fields. So you can really restrict that, and that can help the stability and security of your platform. Other elements that we add into are column descriptions. This is a really good way to educate users of the sheet and maybe even your technical or support staff. So a lot of the times we'll leave this as notes saying, please leave us a detailed description of what the notes is, or explaining what a status item is. So if you're training a new user and you give them a Smartsheet, and they first time they're ever seeing it, you can coach them and say, look at the sheet, but also look at the column descriptions. Say enter detailed notes here. And this just pops up with little eye indicators. So if they hover over that, they can see that kind of help text that can explain kind of contextually what they should be doing inside of the sheet. There's also a summary panel on the right. So a lot of these kind of functions are native. You can add a how-to guide in here, and this can be free text where you can update all of your notes inside of this. So it's instead of creating extra tools outside, your user has to be trained or maintained, they can go through and just look at the sheet and kind of intuitively or natively get all the information that they need inside of those builds. So those are ways that we again kind of self-document inside of the solutions, and it gets a way to get the users to use the sheet and not overwhelmed by, hey, you have to click here to understand how it works. I'm going to click to another sheet or view a report to find out the information. You keep it all in a single spot.
Another question came in, and maybe you can hop to the dashboard that you were on before real quick before
Sure.
we move on. Someone had asked how maybe certain personnel can utilize Smartsheet if they don't have email. Is there a way to access information? And I'm thinking you can talk about this form that is maybe embedded on the dashboard a little bit, because that's probably the best way.
Yeah. So if someone doesn't have an email to log in or access, there's a couple ways to do it. So if you're trying to collect information, you can publish a web form that's inside of the sheet. So we can just basically get a URL code, and I'll go into the inspection form. So this is that web form that we made. If you take this link, you can paste that on a website. You can provide it maybe with a client or another vendor, something like that. And within the form, you can choose if someone needs to sign into that or if it's just a free form. So I'm actually going the inspection sheet. And if I go in the form builder, there's a settings tab. And this is what allows you to say, if people don't have an email to line up in Smartsheet, you just turn that off, and now it's a public form, and people can fill in information inside of that link from there. So it's a good tab to visit. There's been a lot of enhancements to this recently as far as capture rules or security settings. You can customize the way it looks out. You can kind of really change the way the visualization from that. Alternatively, if you also want to share them information, not just to collect it from a web form, but you want to share that dashboard, you can publish the dashboard and make that a URL that they could visit. So again, people don't have to have a sign in or log in to Smartsheet. You could make this a public link, and then everyone that has that link can go to the dashboard. They can view that information. They could submit new inspections to kind of help you guys self-service that. So we see that a lot with like client portals or customer portals in the project management space, or it's like a self-service item. So you could use that for manufacturing if someone wanted to do maybe they want to submit a work order and they didn't know when they wanted to schedule their work. They could come to a work order request dashboard, something similar like this, kind of look at your production schedule and pick a date that might align back where they want to update that. So that can help with your capacity planning. And we have a little mini demo of that on the next one.
Great. And that might be a good segue into the next example as well. I know there's still some questions and we can get to those at the end, and we're typing in as well.
Perfect. Okay. So production planning. So definitely, I know an important one here. That's something that comes up often. So a lot of times we want to see, where we might be running out of work and where we might want to fit in work to kind of maintain our thresholds. Identifying bottlenecks between departments, if they're over capacity or if part of machinery is down, and then kind of do some of that forecasting with the production schedules, see it on a timeline view, and then maybe update resources on who's operating that department or who needs to be reassigned if they're busy from there. So again, just a quick snapshot. We've got our dashboard and we have a mobile view. So if you're working on the shop floor, you don't necessarily have to be looking at a giant picture. Maybe you want to do kind of a hot batch where you're doing a quality audit. You can pop that up on your mobile device and then kind of view and update that information on phone. And then that will update back to the sheet itself. So we'll hop right in and we'll start right in at the dashboard. So in here, we have a couple of charts, a few charts actually, and we've got a workstation capacity one. This is something that you could set up. So if you know that a certain department should have a work in progress limit, maybe it's 10 batches that are in production, you can kind of set those thresholds. And if a work order is in the queue, you can see what is their planned limit if they're exceeding that, and that would show you potential bottlenecks in here. So in this case, I've got it exampled as an estimate, but if I'm looking at my assembly department, they could handle 74 hours worth of labor. And then in the actual queue, they're at 64. So they should be fine. In an inverse, something that might be closer, might be a brake department is going to be way past capacity. That might be a scheduling issue. Maybe I need to shift my production queue to help offload that department, or maybe I need to spin up a new workstation to help kind of offload that that barrier point. Similar question, if you want to see which departments are most heavily updated with work, that might need to go to resourcing things or cases. We've got a workstation of work in progress that shows you the total volume of work at this specific point in time that's being handled by departments. So you can choose to show a percentage, or you can invert this to show a count of items by WIP. But one that's probably more valuable would be the kind of a burn down chart within your production timeline. In this specific example, I've got this as a rolling period that I'm showing only kind of a 30-day range. You can extend this out to a 90-day range if you want. If you don't want to do it by days, if you wanted to do it by weeks, you can update it from here. But what I've done in this example is we've set a production capacity or benchmark. At any point in time, we maybe want to be producing 1,000 widgets every day. And then I can see the actual work that's coming through inside of my work plan. Maybe we need to start pitching in new sales or work orders towards the beginning of March to kind of base our line to get back to that production threshold. Of course, this is going to give you information that you maybe to increase your shop staff so that you can meet that production schedules, or offload it, or in the case you don't want to go through that cyclical pattern of hiring and firing people to meet the production schedule. This will give you a visualization to see where you might need to get more work in or split shifts. There's a quick question here about the dates of the timeline to update the chart. We'll definitely step into that. I might do a split screen, but this is built off of a report. So anytime you're modifying a start date or end date, and you save that item inside of the sheet, it will update this automatically. So in this build, everything is automatic. So you don't have to go through and update ranges. All you have to do is just make sure you're updating your production schedule as you might normally would, and everything else is going to follow suit automatically. So items within that production report, I've just got maybe my manufacturing order and maybe a description of that batch that's going through. It could be a client name, et cetera. And I've just got 3 major categories to kind of track at a very high level of the production date. So I'm checking to see how's the material. Do I have the material in stock, or do we know it's coming in? How's the production going? How's delivery? Maybe the type of production order that's going through here. Which department is currently working on that object? My production start dates, finish dates, and then due dates of items. So this is a report that's representing that sheet information that you can drill in from there. And I've got this just kind of overlaid inside of a Gantt chart to see everything that's batched in. Now the values of the reports is you can modify these dates and times kind of real time. So maybe this MicroRaptor schedule needs to be adjusted and I need to punt it out 30 days. So I can shift this from January, hop in from the start. And if it's maybe a short time task, I can update this from here and it's going to update the schedule. So if I save this, it'll probably be a little bit small because it's a long batch, but it's going to automatically update that full range inside of the production schedule, as well as these other tasks. So we can do a larger range of information. Maybe I just want to shift out all of these guys. We'll start it to, let's do today's maybe plus 2 weeks on a full batch. We'll just keep all these guys the same time. So I'm gonna shift these guys up and we'll do, maybe they're a 60-day kind of range. If we go back to our chart, now we can see our production line has shifted that full segment. So that's how fast it can be. Typically in this environment, if we build builds like this with clients, usually they'll have that production schedule on the right-hand side of the page and then the dashboard on the left so they can save and see it refresh. Some additional options is you can actually embed that sheet live as opposed to reporting it. And then you get a similar experience where you can save the sheet in the same view, refresh it, and then you would get that dashboard to update real time. And then further down, we've got just this is a grouped report. So I've got this grouped by my workstations. It's not going to show me the specific subset of details on this view, but at a very high level, I can see, my assembly is working on 3 batches. The average load in that batch, in this case, I'm calling it effort. This could be the production hours, and you could get that information from maybe a Harris pricing index. That's information that you could import or export or sync via the API or one of those other services and map in to get those time efforts. You could do time studies. So if you know how long it takes you to do a specific production run or a service for those, that can be stored inside of the sheet and help roll up those objects here to tell you the total volume or capacity if you're not just doing it by a batch count. In this view, we're starting about the start dates, finish dates. If there's 3 batches or 5 batches and then the break department, it'll show you the first date and then the last date of production. So between these 2 ranges will tell you the total volume of production within that date time. There was a couple of questions. I'll pause there and we can hop into the sheet itself. So creating formulas with updating ship dates and due dates for ship time criteria. And then there's one also about dependencies between departments. So I'd say those are semi-related, at least within the production schedule. So let me switch over to the sheet. And these ones are a little more finicky for on the fly kind of build outs, but within the schedule, you can set those dependencies of these tasks. So I'm just inside of my flat grid view for my production schedule. But if I wanted to switch over to view the actual production timeline, I can switch over from here and then manage that. So we'll start first with just a batch to batch, not necessarily from department to department. But if you wanted to run that sequence, you can actually schedule the dependencies inside that Gantt view itself to say this batch has to finish before the next. And it's just kind of a normal sequence of a start to finish. You can offload these, with some lagging or leading times in this. There's actually a brand new formula that Smartsheet released that I think is very valuable in the manufacturing space, and that's the float function. And in this case, it's just a total float based on your primary column, but that will tell you how many days you can shift it without impacting the schedule. So if you haven't seen that yet, it might be something interesting to check out and try implementing within your builds. So that's how the predecessors of the relation manager within a batch environment work. Per department, you may be introducing something along the lines of a hierarchical function, where as opposed to having a workstation that this is assigned to, this could be a parent level row and then the work is mapped in. So if I'm doing something on the fly, we're going to say this is our welding department. And maybe these batches are currently being worked on by the welding team. And then maybe this one is paint and finish. Keep that out. So we'll add some white space here. So we have 2 departments, right? Welding has to be completed everything before painting and finishing. So if you're completing a batch of, say this Hyperion batch is being completed, in a workflow, your users could just take this and drag it down into the paint and finish department, and that will show them the next stage of work. So your relationship could be based on the parent categories of these activities to build out your scheduling. So there's a couple different ways to get that updated from there. And hopefully that answered the question. Yeah. And I think there's a quick question. I should be able to, yeah, I can definitely go over the hours so I can spend some more time in some open examples as well. I know we're in the thick of it, but I'll take a quick pause.
Yeah, I know we did have this scheduled up until 2 p.m. Eastern, but like Chris mentioned, we can definitely keep this running. If you have to drop, we totally understand. We are recording though, and we'll make this available to everyone afterwards as well. And I think there had been a question from Tyler about how the capacity is being calculated. Maybe you can just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so in this sample, what I'm doing is each one of my production batches, I've just assigned a generic effort. So this again could be hours, it could be just the count of batches in production, whatever value that you need to track for your workflow capacity. I usually use a production schedule in this to show where on the planning segment of it, but I usually pair these with what I call a timeline sheet. And this is a little difficult sometimes in Smartsheet to build, but what it can be done is it's basically just a sheet that has a fixed range. So this is my rolling time period. So in this case, I'm just doing it for a 30-day range, but I've got maybe, I want to look back retrospectively, maybe a week in the past and then 3 weeks forward. So I just built a range of days, and I do it by days because it's the smallest element. So it's the most accurate, but you could group it by week. So in this case, I have a list of days, and then I've got a cross sheet formula, and this one is a sum ifs of that effort. So if it's hours in this case for that batch, it's summing the hours of those batches where the start date of that production is greater than, or sorry, is less than or equal to this date, and then is greater than or equal to the finish date. And we can provide these formulas or kind of some samples afterwards so you guys can see this. But basically all it's doing from the production schedule is saying how many batches are in production where this date is between the start and finish date of that batch, and it's summing those hours together. And then this is the sheet that's actually being reported on that production dashboard. So that's giving us that burn down over time. So the more batches that are occurring during this active date, it's going to sum up and increase it from there. And you can invert this, so it could be a burn up. So if you're doing maybe on the construction side of things, if you want to see how your hours are accumulating over time, you could certainly add in the same element from here, and it would just show you the total hours increasing over. That's definitely more, again, you can build it in Smartsheet, but if it's too difficult, or if it's something that you want to have more drill down capacity, you can still take the information from your production schedule and sync that to a Power BI or a Tableau. And there's queries or functions that can transform that information. Basically, that service would do what we've done inside of Smartsheet, but this is a really nice way of doing it natively, so you don't have to get an additional service on top of it.
Perfect. And thanks for showing that, Chris. I know Tyler mentioned thank you as well.
Yeah. Great.
And one quick note too, I know, I think Cruz had requested a time feature, maybe like a time-based column in Smartsheet. We are aware that's a big ask and something I think we're looking into. What I can do too is put our feature request form or feature kind of like idea form in the chat in a moment. So if you want to provide that feedback to us and maybe you have other thoughts, we definitely encourage it, and you can fill that out.
Great. Awesome. So we'll just quickly go over kind of the last slide and then maybe a full open forum towards the end. I do want to touch base on the safety aspect of things. But yeah, that's a base level production dashboard.
Perfect. And as Chris is switching, I'm going to run one last poll too. I know we had quite a few premium features and tools mentioned today. So if anyone has to drop, but maybe they want more information on some of these functionalities, just fill out that poll and we can provide that to you.
Awesome. Last up is safety. As Mike Rowe said, safety third. So in this case, it's the fourth item. So a close pairing. But a lot of the times, this is something that's, I think, can be overlooked at times because it's an extra administrative burden. So what you can do in Smartsheet is you can actually make a self-service training and education portal. We found this really effective in the manufacturing space as well as in construction, where it may not be something that's easily managed or maintained for these user groups. So what we wanted to provide was a training portal where any user could come into this. Maybe it's during their onboarding or part of their routine schedule. You can share them a Smartsheet dashboard that will have maybe some descriptive text. You can embed a training video in on it. And you can build in your quiz or your form to test the knowledge of the employee that's taking that course. And all of that is when they get that dashboard, they can fill in the information. It will automatically grade it for them and then spit out for your safety team or your operations team that may need to provide those reports for whether it's OSHA or maybe your own internal training and services from that. So we talked about automated certifications and system of records, very similar to the way facilities management works, where if a certification date is set to expire, we can set up a system to send out alerts to that actual employee with a link to the certification dashboard. So then really it's a hands-free environment. So as soon as they make their way in for a new employee, the system can take over and automatically send it out. So let's dive in. So this here is just a single sample of a dashboard. This is specifically tailored to fault protection. We've got just a general description of what fault protection is. We've got a little sponsored video from here. You can rip these from YouTube, put them in. If you have your own custom video, you can embed those inside of the web. But a user can come through here. They can watch the video. They can fill out the quiz at the same time. So it's a really nice way for them to learn content and update at the same time. So from this, we just got a basic form, but there's different options that the way that form can be visualized, and that's going to be based on the column types. And there's been several enhancements over the past few months and even in the past year to make these web forms a bit more pleasant for people to interact with. So in here, I'm just keeping it generic. I've got employee ID. You could request the employees enter their work email if you would like. There's a new option for form data validation to make sure that it has to be an actual active email address, which can be really good. Because from there you can send that email address an automated alert or approval. This is just a quick answer. What's the answer for the fall requirement? I'm not great at OSHA stuff, so if I pick the wrong answers, forgive me. But we would be able to see that on form submission for the results. Multiple select is something new in Smartsheet, so you can select multiple fields, true false options inside, hard hats, safety like that. So you can customize these forms with as many questions as you'd like. And when a user submits it, they can go through. There's also data points that you can check. If I didn't fill out everything, it's going to tell you, hey, you have to fill in this information before completion. So what we've done with things like this is we might build a larger content library. So again, this is one dashboard specifically for fall protection, but you could take this file, save as new, and then say maybe this one is for silica awareness or for lockout tagout policies, and then just change the content inside of the sheets, maybe upload a new video, upload the description, the form itself. You'd want to create a new questionnaire to handle those questions, but then you can embed that inside. So now we're going to kind of take a similar approach and we're going to look at the back end and then update. There's a quick question on the radio buttons, and we'll show that when we get to the back end. So I'm going to go into the sheet. So the big brains of this sheet is really this fall protection quiz. That's what I've called it, at least. So this is how, when a user fills out that form data, this is what the sheet's going to look like filled out. I didn't intend for this to be readable from a human's perspective, because it really just kind of look at that score. And then if you need to follow up, you can view that information within this grid format. But if you wanted to make it a little bit easier to digest, you can always change the view from grid, maybe flip this over to a card view. And then if I wanted to hop in and view the details, I can see the question and then how they had or the user had responded to that question. I might make some training notes and update it from there. I use short terminology just for that column header. For Q5 would be question 5, but you could say question 5 is, what is the type of fall arrest systems that they should be using from here? So you can get more descriptive inside of that. Another good case or plug from this would be column descriptions. So instead of taking up maybe a really long question that I want to use for that column, often you might run into that column naming limit with inside the sheet. So a good way to do this is maybe a shorthand column, keeps it a little bit cleaner, and then just adding a column description for the full explanation of that text there. Again, the user can hover over that field, view the details, and update it. In this case, I've just got a basic score. I've got an answer key as my top row. So these cells below reference, so it says if a user entered 4 and it doesn't match the key, that's going to kind of decrement the score, at least with, in 10 from here. There's a lot of ways to do this, but that's the one that was selected in this. This is my logic, at least, for tracking that. So again, this is just saying if the question for row 1 matches the answer for row 1, then it'll be checked as true. If they missed it, it's just going to be false. So that's the brains behind that. But within the form, the multiple kind of column types is really dependent on these columns. And sometimes it's difficult to see what column type is what, if it's single dropdown or multiple dropdown. So when I'm building out quiz forms, I actually like doing it in the new form builder. So if this question 1, I wanted to change it to a multiple select. If I click on this field, you can see there's a drop down list right here. And that tells me what type of column it is. If you click this pencil, you can actually change it to a multiple select. And then that's going to give you some new formatting options. So this one is a drop down, but if I wanted vertical checkboxes like before, you might just play around with these toggles to get that information. There was another question about pictures as choices in a form. So to my knowledge, you can't embed a picture as a question, but there is a, if you have an emoji per se, or a custom image that you want to embed, you can actually take that. So let me see if I can go to Emojipedia or get emojis. This is a great way to update new like status dropdowns, but say there's something, maybe you're saying an injury is a broken tooth, and this is a terrible example, but if you wanted to make that an option for an image, maybe we're saying E is teeth. If you find an emoji or an emoji type picture, you can come in here and paste it. And now I've got an actual image as a drop-down value. And so I can save that. And then when my user's accessing that web form, and you can list from that, you can open that form, they'd be able to now see that as a drop-down object with the tooth. So it's a limited use case, but it can help expand what symbols you use, because now you can have all flavors of emojis out there and items for that. But yeah, so nothing for images yet.
One of our biggest requests is to have more status ball colors in that kind of symbol type column. And that's a great way of doing it. I know we do that internally. So I'm glad Chris was able to show that. Yep. So you can add a few more colors in there, options for your users.
A great question for the symbol. With these symbols, if you're using a native symbol, the index match, you just type for the color. So if you're trying to say index match or count all that are red, you'd use the red. If you're using a custom emoji in that example, it's stored as an actual text value. So you can actually write a formula to reference. So we'll break the sheet temporarily. But if I want to say do count if all of the question 1s, just do question 1 again through question 2. So this is how you can define a full column range. It's just remove the numbers for the rows that match my tooth emoji. That's how you can embed it in the formula. So similar case with a symbol, you might type red, and then with Smartsheet's native dropdowns, that's how that can be updated. So. But that's the fall protection quiz and dashboard and forms. I'll do quick plugs. I do want to just talk about the certification log. OSHA training is just some quick links for references. So if your team needs to see when their items are expiring, you can kind of give them a navigational content to OSHA's website or any other self-service training from here. So user click on this, and it's going to update that specific standard, maybe some training notes or policies. But on the certification log, this is just a really basic item, but say someone is ready to record that they had completed training or passed it. You could create a web form. Maybe they're doing job site training or shop floor training. You could pair this with a web form where the user or the trainer enters in the employee's ID and maybe the topic. And in this case, what I'm doing is when the topic is selected, I'm referencing that OSHA sheet to tell me how long that topic is valid for. And then I can say, Chris got trained on September 15th. This specific certification is valid for 2 years. So it's going to automatically calculate out when it's going to expire. And I can set a workflow automation to send out to the trainer or to the trainee, hey, your certification is due soon. Please take it again. You could send them back to that training dashboard, and that kind of recycles the process. All right. That's the quick summary on the safety one. Let's see some other questions. Equipment validation plan templates. I might need some clarification on what you mean by equipment validation, but the Solution Center is a great place to view content. So if you want to see where that's at, there's just this plus sign, and then you can browse your solutions for those individuals or search within this range.
On that too, and Bill, if you can provide any further clarification, that would be great. But I know we do have an equipment schedule template. So if you search for that or just search equipment, you should be able to pull that up in the Solution Center.
Machine maintenance schedule, that might be one.
Yep.
And so just showcasing that when you grab the template from the Solution Center, it'll actually create the sheet for you. A template sheet is a single one. There's definitely template sets, and those are a little bit more items that include dashboards and reports kind of pre-configured. Qualifying equipment during a relocation move. So maybe there's a sizing space or constraint. If there's questions that you have to ask about moving that machinery, you could build a sheet that asks those questions and update that. I'm not sure if that's a little bit more in line with that specific use case, but we're happy to explore that with you if you want to reach out to us afterwards, and we can maybe do a quick live demo or proof of concept. And that goes for any other solutions too. So great. So that's everything, at least I have for a mainline presentation for deep dive. There was a question about float. We'll hop in there real quick. So we'll go back to our production planning, do our production schedule, and then maybe I'll pass it back to you, Kelsey, and we can look at where we want to go next, and we'll do a quick Q&A with some questions there. But so we're just going to create a new float formula here. So we'll call this float demo. And so if you're using the float demo, you have to have dependencies enabled within your project plan. So in order to do that, you have to have a start date and a finish date. And you can enable that by, when you make a task sheet, basically, you can right click on a column and go to project settings, and then define the start date, end date, and enable predecessors or dependencies. And that might add in a predecessor column and duration column. So once that's in there, you can use a float formula, and that one is just total float. And you can grab this. And it's a little kind of quirky, but it'll give you a little tool temp to say in the example, it has to be referenced the primary column. That's always the column that has the bold header or where the collapsing function is. And then I'm just grabbing that one. It doesn't have to be called description, but if I enter this, and then if I right click that cell and convert to a column formula, it'll fill it down and make it stable, and that'll give me my total float. So the float will change if there's dependencies from task to task and go from there. So great. Clicked on that. Hopefully that answered your question on that. So yeah, like I said, open forum, but I'll take a quick pause. I know we definitely showcased a lot of samples, so I really appreciate you guys bearing with me and watch me click all over the place. Hopefully I wasn't too fast or too confusing, but just as a quick plug, if you guys want to see more samples or do kind of live calls, I'll pass it over to Eddie briefly, and he can talk about some items that we can help engage with you.
Yeah, sure, Chris. Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. Love all the questions and interaction today. It's been incredible to see. I love collaboration. So anyway, I just wanted to take a moment, first of all, to thank both Kelsey and Chris for hosting this webinar and sharing this content that we feel is so valuable for the manufacturing community. My name is Eddie Nostrand. As Kelsey mentioned at the beginning of our time, I'm the National Sales Director here at Optimum Consultancy Services. And being that there's a lot being covered today, we would love to follow up with you and answer any questions that you might have in a more personalized setting. And so that's why you see this QR code. So feel free to go ahead and scan the QR code here on the screen, and we can get that time set up with you. Once again, thank you to all the attendees for joining us today. We really look forward to the continued conversations that are going to come out of this. And at this, I will hand it right back to you, Kelsey.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Chris. That was excellent. I know I definitely learned a lot, and we had a lot of great discussions happening in the chat and the questions coming in. I think we got to most of the questions. I'm trying to look through now. If we didn't, we can follow up with you after the fact. And like Eddie mentioned, if you do have any questions for Optimum or you want to meet with them on more of a one-on-one setting, we encourage you to maybe call their phone number listed there or just scan that QR code, and that can connect you directly to them. But I know we're over about 15 minutes. One thing I did want to mention, Chris, if you could just hop to the next slide real quick. And the next one, one quick thing I wanted to call out. I know we did have a lot of maybe premium tools mentioned today. I saw a lot of questions about maybe getting started with Smartsheet or getting started with some of these different resources or tools that Chris had mentioned. A great place to do that is our webinars. So those are definitely more kind of beginner level, intermediate, and we encourage you to watch those. And then if you have questions after that, again, reaching out to resources like Optimum or even your Smartsheet account teams is a great way to get those questions answered. So I just wanted to put a quick plug in for that. And I do know we're over about 15 minutes. Thank you to everyone who stayed on. This was fantastic, and I hope you got a lot out of the session. And Chris, once again, thank you so much for running through those different examples. They were very valuable, and we hope that our users in the manufacturing community are able to take and maybe replicate some of the things that you showed today. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your day.